Welcome to Colonial Classics, a food demonstration with the House of the Seven Gables live in my kitchen. Tonight, I'm going to walk you all through making Colonial savory cheese pudding dinner from the early American cookbook, Authentic Favorites for the Modern Kitchen, which you can buy at our museum store. The House of the Seven Gables strives to be a welcoming, thriving historic site and community resource that engages people of all backgrounds in our inclusive American story. Continuing this work takes time, effort, and money. We would like to thank our members who are here tonight and invite you to become a member if you are not. We have some great programs and member events lined up in 2022. We have included a link for membership in the chat. We have also included a link for donations to help us cover the costs of this demonstration and to support our work as a community resource. Any amount is greatly appreciated. I would personally like to thank all the people who have supported this program and got it going safely during COVID-19, especially Holly Watson and John Cryan, who are my support crew tonight. During this demonstration, please turn off your camera and keep yourself muted. If you have a question or comment at any time during this demonstration, please type it into the chat and it will be read aloud to me. The goal of this demonstration is to connect with everyone, so don't be afraid to engage in the chat either with me or each other. Now, who's ready to get started?
Hello. Hi. So yes, this is a change from our usual kitchen in the House of the Seven Gables visitor service cafe. I'm not feeling too well, so we decided for the safest choice would be to do Colonial Classics in my new apartment. So this is going to be very exciting. So behind the camera, I have my boyfriend, John, who's assisting with the tech and will read out the questions for you guys. And Holly is virtual from home to help make sure everyone's got it admitted and to double check, make sure we don't miss anyone's questions. So the recipe for today in the cookbook, in the early American cookbook, is called John Endicott's Savory Cheese Pudding Dinner. It's a mouthful, so I've just been calling it the Savory Cheese Pudding Dinner. And so here it is. Is that a good shot right there? You'll see it? I hope so. It's interesting. It's very spongy, and when I mean sponge, I mean like the wet sponge that you use to clean your dishes. I'm gonna cut a slice. It makes a kind of squishy sound when you cut it, which I don't think you guys can hear, but I can hear very clearly here, and it's very interesting. It's very floppy. Originally, when I decided to do this, there you go. There's a look of it. Yeah. So originally, I thought this was going to be a little bit more quiche-like, a little bit more solid. It's very jiggly, sort of like gelatin, because most of it is just egg whites. So I'm going to put this away and we're going to get started. Ooh, I don't know where I'm putting it. There we go. So we're going to get started with the main ingredient, which is 2 cups of cheese. So I'm going to grate that and put it in our bowl. I'm using cheddar cheese. I was doing some research trying to figure out what the best cheese was going to be. And I do love cheddar cheese. It's one of my favorite cheeses. It's a good go-to. And during my research, I learned that cheddar cheese is actually the first American cheese. The Puritans who came to Massachusetts, in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, were from a dairy part of England around from a dairy, like very well known for its making of cheeses as well as butter. And so when they came, they brought along cows and their cheese making methods. And so that's how we got cheddar cheese in Massachusetts. And then it gradually expands throughout the rest of the colonies. So I'm almost there. I wanted to get some nice fresh grated cheese instead of the store grated cheese. I liked how it ended up in the pudding. There you go. That's about 2 cups. We'll go with it. into our bowl. Yeah, my first attempt at this, I used a mixture of cheddar cheese and mozzarella cheese. Did not go as well. When at one point I'm gonna have to put some hot milk into this, and the cheddar cheese kind of stays a little bit solid. It like mixes in very well, whereas the mozzarella cheese just became like, it melted and then combined itself to like trying to go back into the ball. So not really the best. So yes, I definitely recommend cheddar cheese, not just because it's delicious, but also historically accurate to Massachusetts. All right, so next I'm gonna put in 1 teaspoon of flour, a half teaspoon of salt, and a fourth a teaspoon of pepper. Wow, lost that one. Do we have any questions in the chat so far?
Just wishing you well, hoping you feel better soon.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm doing better. All right, so those are just in there.
One person just asked, did they have cheese graters?
They have cheese graters. I'm trying to remember. I believe yes. Yeah, there have been ways of grating your cheese. Plus, the cheese would have had to age. I just watched actually a video on making some colonial style cheese from a YouTube channel, Townsend. It was really fun. And when the cheese, for it to be safe, they have to wait for it for about 60 days to make sure that it has only like the good bacteria, not the bad bacteria. And when they cut into it, it really crumbled. So it's drier cheese than what we have here. So it would most likely just crumble like that instead of you needing to grate it. They didn't really, this would be, even though cheddar is like kind of a hard cheese, it's softer compared to the colonial cheese that I was finding when I was researching. So now that that's there, I need to boil some milk. We're gonna come over here, boil some milk. You have to really make sure to keep an eye on boiling your milk because it'll go slow at first and then it really just catches up on you. It becomes this really nice sort of foam on the top, and then you start to really smell it, which is really nice. And then all of a sudden it'll start boiling and expanding and then boil over, which you don't want. So don't do that. So the majority of the cheeses, the cheeses that were in early colonial America were cow cheese, whereas today we have a lot of different cheeses, sheep and goat cheeses. There are different consistencies. There was a lot of different cheeses over in Europe, but not really so many over in the in the American colonies until much later, and it didn't really fully expand. So started out in Massachusetts, and then as people started to move sort of west, cheese started being produced in New York and Ohio, and that's when it started being really produced for everyone in what was then America.
One person just asked, how much milk do you use?
How much milk? This is 1 cup of milk. So you have to bring 1 cup of milk to a boil. You also have to have a tablespoon of melted butter, which I've already melted ahead of time. If you don't want to dirty another bowl, you can just melt it in with the butter. That's what I did my first try, and it worked just the same. I just wanted to separate so that way you guys could see it. Yeah, and it helps. I do honestly prefer gas stoves to electronic stoves. Something about just the fire, you know something's happening, whereas with the electric stove, I'm never sure if something's happening until I put my hand over it. So, all right.
Another person just asked, is whole milk best? So what kind of milk to use?
Oh goodness, I didn't even think about the kind of milk. This is, I think 1% milk is what we have in the fridge right now. It would change. I'm trying to think. I'm like looking at it. It would be a little bit creamier, I think, which might be nicer. So I would hope that it would be creamier and nicer than the sponge that I end up with.
And someone else asked, what would they have had?
What would they have had? They would have had it straight from the cow. It would have been unpasteurized or any of that, straight from the cow into the kitchen. The majority during the colonial times, the cheese was just made for the house. maybe if you had some extra, you'd sell it in a local market. But it wasn't until that it had become American, like we had after the American Revolution, and then starting to go into the 1800s, that we start getting the cheese being really produced for a larger population of people outside of the home. So we're getting factories and stuff. Well, now we got the factories. Yeah. Any other questions on there? I've really enjoyed looking up cheese. There was just so much stuff, and it's not just all from Wisconsin. You can get lots of cheese information for places outside of Wisconsin. But in my preliminary search, it did show up with just a lot of Wisconsin facts, just glazing over the New England history of cheese and then straight to Wisconsin. So, all right, we're starting to get a bit steamy over here, which is nice. I'm just gonna bump up the temperature a little bit, continuing to stir so that way none of the bottom burns. Milk is very temperamental when you're heating it. I always try and be as careful as possible with it and keep an eye on it because it can boil over very quickly. You don't want that. It makes a mess. Oh, I almost forgot to show recipe book. So for this, when I was doing research for this recipe for a savory cheese pudding, first off, I was looking up the difference, like why is it called a pudding? A pudding in the English sense, traditionally is something that is cooked by being steamed or, oh goodness, I need my cheat sheet. I'm blanking on it. Yeah, it's something that's been, it's not really been cooked, it's been steamed in something. So, and that really, I think, is why it rises. So it kind of is like the way the rising agent for this is eggs, is egg whites, and a bit of baking soda, but it's really all about making sure you keep the air in those eggs.
Another question was, would they have weighed the cheese and how would they have measured the liquids?
A lot of it a lot of measurements, if any of you were joined me for Colonial Classics when I did it last winter, you knew that I was translating the recipes. So I had, and that those recipes did not have measurements. Every once in a while, it let me know how many eggs there were, but it wouldn't let me know how much flour or anything. So a lot of that was passed down and people would just know. Oh, we're getting to a foamy stage. So I think it's just something that they knew. Little girls would watch their mothers bake and then they would continue and just pass down that tradition orally because there weren't that many cookbooks. And the ones that you could get were expensive.
And then another question that just came in was British pudding steamed or boiled?
Steamed and boiled, there we go. Speaking of boiling, milk is boiling and rising. There we go. So take that immediately off the heat. So it's nice and foamy. You can't really see it too much. So we're going to move back over to the table. We're going to pour that in there along with our butter and give it a nice stir. So yes, it would have been boiled or steamed. So thank you. That was the word I was missing, was boiled. So yes, a lot of that going on. So it wasn't really baked. All right, so just mix in all this, make sure it's incorporated. You can come closer and see the cheese is like sort of melting, but it's not clumping, which is the issue that I had. It's not really clumping, which is what I had the issue with mozzarella. All right, so once you've done that, you can put that off to the side for now. And we're gonna blend. And I'm gonna make sure to remember my baking powder this time because the past 2 times I've made this, I forgot my baking powder until the very last second. But I did remember it. But that's the important part. So yes, really don't forget this because this will help make it your foam, your egg whites froth a little bit faster, nice and becoming stiff, which is what you want. You don't want them too stiff. You want it to be soft peaks, all right? And I don't have blender, so we're gonna go like this. Make coffee a little difficult. I tried to do this by hand the first time. It was not fun. My arm was very sore. And I only got to like that foaming consistency. It was very minimal, didn't have that much air. My pudding sank immediately. Any questions, Evan?
So how would they have done it?
They would have done it by hand. And they would have had stronger arms than me, I hope. They would have been more used to it than I am. I'm definitely not used to lots of whisking.
And then
so-
one more question is, how much baking powder and how many egg whites?
So it's 2 eggs separated. So I have the egg yolks over there. Those are gonna go in as well. So it's the 2 egg whites, and it is a ½ teaspoon of baking powder. And I'll send you guys the recipe at the end. You'll have the recipe all for yourselves. So we all set there. We're almost there. Starting to get shiny. There we go, soft peak. It's still going over the edge. All right, so bring this back over. Mixing my butter a little bit more. My butter seems pretty separate at the moment. Let's mix that all in. Oh, that's why we have the apron. All right, so I'm gonna put in my egg yolks, which I have lightly beaten. That way they incorporate nice. That one you can just swoop, normal stirring. Now, when you put in the egg whites, you have to do that very carefully because you don't want to knock out any of the air. And that's kind of what makes this souffle-like. So when you try and look up this recipe, it's not really going to come up as a savory cheese pudding. It's going to come up as a cheese souffle. That's what it was actually have right here. This is from a cookbook from the 60s. And it has the cheese souffle, which is very similar. It has a bit of extra things in it, but very similar to this recipe that I'm using now. During World War II, there were a lot of variations of this made because it's stuff that you have at home, can kind of get easy access to, and then add to and make it your own based on what you have. So in World War II, based on what you had rations for. For the first time making this recipe, I didn't have to go food shopping. I had everything already in the kitchen, which was fantastic. All right, so now I'm gonna put in these egg whites and I'm gonna do very carefully, because if I mess these up, then it won't rise. So you're gonna wanna do around and then through the middle, around and through the middle, and just keep doing that nice and carefully so it gets incorporated, but you're not losing any of that air. Because if the air's gone, you have a sunk souffle. And it's just gonna keep going like that. Any questions? Okay. Also helps if you have your oven at 350, which I could have sworn I did earlier. Your oven needs to be at 350. I was wondering why I hadn't heard the noise. It usually makes a nice little singing noise when it's ready. So that'll be all set. And John's laughing at me. He's trying not to, but he is. All right, so now we're getting nice and incorporated. So it's nice and foamy, nice even color throughout. It's really nice. And so now we're gonna have some breadcrumbs. Over here, so we have 2 tablespoons of breadcrumbs, which because you've already put your egg whites in here, you have to make sure to incorporate those very carefully. So again, you're not knocking any of that air out. So I'm gonna take this 1 scoop at a time.
One person just asked, would this have been served on its own or with something else?
Yeah, so this can be served on its own. I don't know, like I said, when I was doing my research, I didn't actually get a lot of colonial references to it. I got actually a lot of World War II ones, and then into the 60s and 70s. And a lot of people like just serve it with a salad. I am going to be honest with you guys, this is not my favorite recipe. I've tried some interesting things. It's not nearly as bad as Sam. Sam was way worse. So any of you who were here last January, when I did Sam for my first ever Colonial Classics, I tipped the bowl upside down because it was that bad that it didn't. I tipped the bowl upside down and it didn't move. Now we have the opposite. You tip this upside down, it's going to jiggle a whole bunch and move around more than I think it should. So yes, go ahead, try it out. You might like it more than me. I had 2 pieces of it and decided I was done. It is interesting. It's an experience. The way I describe it best is kind of like a mushy grilled cheese. So if you take in a grilled cheese, put some milk, put it in a blender with some milk and just mush it up.
And what's your favorite?
My favorite is the baked chicken in winter that I made last February, I believe. That had the Madeira and currants and chicken. And that's also the one I'm most proud of because that was a very difficult recipe to translate from the colonial recipe into the modern kitchen recipe. I need to make that again. I made 7 of them in preparation for Colonial Classics last year, and I haven't made it since, but it is my favorite. All right, so I have a greased cake tin. I found that this works out the best. You definitely don't want one of those release ones because this is very, very liquidy and it will just liquefy all out the sides. So don't do that. So we're just gonna gently pour this in. Get all our cheese in there. Every last bit.
And someone asked which Seven Gables cookbook is the chicken meal in?
The chicken one actually isn't in House of the Seven Gables cookbook. I found that one on the internet. If you want to direct message Holly your email, I can email you that recipe directly, or I could, if everyone wants to have it, I could email that. You can also find it on the House of the Seven Gables YouTube page. It's baked chicken in winter. So that was really good. All right, so we're not at. I always forget one thing. You guys who have been here before, you know I always forget one thing. I somehow remembered all the ingredients, which was great. I was very happy about that. I just forgot to start the oven, which is good. Are there any last questions? Because now you guys see what this looks like. I'll get the final product out again. You don't have to see me put it in the oven. You guys know what it looks like when you put stuff in the oven. So yeah, there we go. Nice. And I wonder if I could get close enough that the mushiness will work. I'm trying to put it near the microphone. I don't know if you guys can hear the mushy, but it just mushed. Wow. Because it is mostly air, but you got the nice brown on the sides. So it cooked nicely. And I also knew it was done because when poke something into this, it will come out clear when it's done, like a cake. But it also starts to come off of the sides like a cake does. So you know a cake is done when it starts to come off of the tin just a little bit. So it's like it's separating. And so that's also another way of knowing it's done, which is really great. So it's easy. You can make it at any time. It doesn't take too long.
Someone asked if the sides get crunchy or do they stay spongy?
No, they're still spongy. They've turned brown. I bet if I left it in there and burned it, they'd turn crunchy. But this light brown, it's actually really soft and it's not crunchy at all. Yeah. All right. So if there are no more questions.
What does it taste like?
What does it taste like? Okay, I did tell you guys what it tastes like. I described it best. I'm gonna actually take a bite of this one. I'm just gonna use my hand. No, I'm using my hand. I've already started. Yeah, it is like I definitely got the cheddar, which is really great. It dissolves in your mouth a bit because of the sponginess, because it's mostly just air. And it really does taste like you took a grilled cheese and put it in a blender with a little bit of milk. And it's because of the breadcrumbs. It's because of the breadcrumbs with the cheese. It really just lets me imagine a grilled cheese.
And one person asked if you can hold up the cookbook so that they can.
Hold up the cookbook, sure. So the House of the Seven Gables is going to be closed in January, but hopefully you'll be able to call in or email for a copy. We sell this at the House of the Seven Gables Museum store, so you can have access to that. It is very interesting. It's made, the way that they described it is that they created this cookbook for food buffs and history buffs. So it has a little bit of history in it as well. Unfortunately, I don't know where they get any of their recipes from. They don't list where any of these come from. Really, they have some sort resources in the back, but it doesn't tell you which recipes come from where. And this one's associated with John Endicott, who was the first governor of Massachusetts, and it's probably associated with him because of Massachusetts history with cheese. And this would have been something that we would have definitely had back then. So, yeah. It's good. It's very interesting. It's small, easy to move around, and keep on the table while. It's also very durable. I've dropped many an ingredient on this. It has survived so far through all of my tests. All right, and if we're all good, I wish you guys a great night. Our next Colonial Classics is going to be in February. It's the first Wednesday in February. I haven't written my notes, but unfortunately I don't have a printer, so I don't have my notes in front of me, as you can see. So first Wednesday in February. If you're a member, you'll receive, if you're a member, you'll receive an email, probably in our newsletter, with a reminder for that. So, all right, I hope you guys have a great night. Bye.